In South Korea, students spend more time studying than we even spend awake. So I took a look at the system that they use and I applied it to my own life. And now at 24, I successfully run a 7-figure company with multiple employees while maintaining friendships, relationships, and managing my own personal health without burnout. So I'm going to cover exactly how you can do it as well. And it basically comes down to 3 core concepts, which is capture, organize, and execute. And that's it. So the first concept of productivity is basically eliminating the mental clutter so that you can get immediately into the work without that procrastination or that fear of getting into it. And the best way to do that is to remove that mental clutter by noting everything down. So the things that I like to use is I like to use Notion and the Notes app to go and organize all of my thoughts. Even if I just jot it down, at least I'm taking that mental clutter and putting it somewhere so that I can then go and organize it. But before we go ahead and do that, what I like to do is I like to take the 4 main things that I've jotted down, whether there is activities or things that I need to get done or events, and I will note that down in my Google Calendar so that I get reminders. And I also don't lose that concept of what needs to happen. And this is a really good habit to form, is that you just consistently jot down things or capture things when they come to you so that it becomes a consistent habit and you remove that mental clutter without needing to put in too much effort. Now, the first step in the core concept of productivity is essentially to remove the procrastination associated with it. And the only reason that we procrastinate is because we have so much mental clutter that there's no space for us to have free will to think and actually execute on those thoughts. So the best thing that you can do, and the one thing that I've consistently made a habit, is as thoughts come to me and as I have this mental clutter, I like to note it down, even in just the Notes app or the Notion app. I sometimes will just write everything down. It seems like a mess at first, but what I'll do is I'll then pull up my Google Calendar, and out of that mess that I put into my notes, I will identify either main tasks that need to get done, deadlines that I'll do, or plans, and I'll essentially put them down so that I get automatic reminders of when those things are coming up instead of having to remember them. That's the first step of essentially capturing everything down. But the main thing that you want to do is you want to remove the mental complexity so that your brain has space to actually feel calm to do the actual task. So it's all about capturing, it's all about noting down, and it's all about putting it somewhere that you can then break down further. And the next thing that you want to do is you essentially want to organize everything. Organization needs to come before the execution. And that's the type of thing that most people struggle with, is they don't capture, they don't organize, and then they can't even execute. Everyone just has these thoughts and these ideas that they get told what to do, whether you're a student or whether you're working. And then you just expect to execute on it, but it doesn't work that way. You have this mental clutter that you now need to jot down. Now that it's captured in some place, you want to organize that thought process and you want to organize all of those combating thoughts so that you can execute on it. Now, the organization process is going to make the smoothest thing for you to actually execute and become productive in your daily life. Now, what I do personally to organize all of the things that I've jotted down is the first thing that I do is I write down a daily to-do list in my Notes app. There's nothing fancy, and I'm just breaking it down in time slots so I know exactly what I need to focus on and when I need to get it done by. So for example, I will always give myself a hierarchy of contents and a hierarchy of tasks to get done. So from 7 a.m. until 12 p.m., I prioritize my most important tasks that actually get the ball rolling. I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But for now, all you need to do is you need to jot down those thoughts into a chronological order. You need to give yourself a bit of a guideline of action tasks to actually complete. And from there, you will also be able to go and transfer all of that information again further into Google Calendar. And I personally like to work in work blocks. Work blocks work great and is one of the most proven productivity hacks that you can have in your life, because then your brain has less thinking and less friction. So the only thing that you have to do is actually execute that. And that's why productivity goes up so much, just because you're removing the mental clutter and you're removing the anxiety around when you're actually going to get something done, because you're almost giving yourself a task list and you're giving yourself the orders to do things instead of relying on your own willpower. I personally don't like willpower. I like to remove it completely. And that's why I give myself a task list every single day. I have work blocks where I know exactly what I'm going to do. And the other tip I would recommend for you is that you actually put these work blocks in the same work block order or the same time slots every single day. So I know when I wake up, I know immediately what my first task is going to be, and I know when I'm going to get to work. You build that habit inside of your brain, which is also called habit stacking. The book Atomic Habits talks about this really well, and I would recommend that you read about it a bit more further. But the essential concept is that you're organizing everything so that your brain has less work to do and it can use all of that energy on actually getting the task done. Now that you've organized and you've captured everything, it comes to the execution of your actual plans and your tasks, which is what most people actually struggle with. And there's a few more things that come along with this that you need to get into your habit system. But for the most part, it's pretty simple. You've got your work plot set up and you have a daily to-do list. Now what you want to do is you want to prioritize on building momentum. And that's why sometimes putting simpler tasks in the beginning that are also still very productive and contribute to the main goal of your day or your activity is really important. But once you check that off, your brain gets that mental stimulation that it needs to say that this feels good. I've just done something productive. I want to keep working. And that's what I've done consistently for the past 7 years. And I still do it to this day. And to this day, I still get that same stimulation. I still get that dopamine hit that you get when you scroll because you've done something productive and your brain sees that check mark and sees it crossed off on the notes app and it wants to keep going. And I like to use that momentum to build into more of the tougher and the more priority tasks that I know I've been procrastinating for a long time. Sometimes all you need is the mental stimulation to get into that task so that it feels like less of an obstacle. You also need the system in place to make sure that productivity is the only option. And some of the tools that I like to use to make sure that this is happening in the execution process is simple. First of all, I of course refer to my notes app and make sure that that's open. The second thing that I like to do is I like to remove my phone and I put it in a completely separate room. Sometimes I'll even lock it or I'll turn it off completely just because the friction of actually having to leave my office and go to a separate room to get my phone is a little bit more complicated and I always just want to work instead. It's a big obstacle to my path instead of having it readily available and then you get notifications. It's the best thing that I did for myself. And I built the habit of only looking at my phone from noon onwards. That way I knew and my brain associated the morning with strict working focus. So that's one of the tools that I use. Now, if you're still struggling with keeping focus and you still have distractions on your laptop or in your phone, I would recommend downloading a focus app where it hard locks your phone and it hard locks your desktop until you're done with the task or until that certain time block is finished. You literally cannot access your device until that period is over. So sometimes you just need to remove the idea of willpower. I personally don't rely on willpower. I don't trust willpower. I trust systems and I trust habits. And that's what I built for myself. Now, another tool that you can use that is, I think, free as far as I know, is brain.fm. Now, the reason why I really like this app is because it plays music for you that is proven to stimulate your focus. So they have all this music that you can choose from. You can choose different categories, different genres. And the other thing you can do is you can choose work block periods. So the music will stop after a certain period of time and you know that's your time to take a break or your time to do something else. And that during the execution process is incredible because, again, you're not getting distracted by watching social media videos or watching YouTube while you work because that will stray your focus. So instead, having the discipline of having some kind of stimulation that is actually helping your focus is a lot better. Now, I know this is not going to completely make you focus. I know it's going to be very difficult to stay on point with what you're trying to do. And during the execution process, it's going to take a bit of trial and error to figure out what works for you. But what works for me is also a few mental shifts. Now, in my mental shifts, what I like to do for myself is I like to make it a little bit more interesting to work on the things that I'm doing, especially those boring and monotonous tasks I need to get done and get the ball rolling, but I just tend to avoid. I like to make them a little bit more interesting, or I like to make them a bit more challenging. As other ways that you can do this is to give yourself a reward after doing a certain period of work. So for example, if you want to reward yourself with a snack, or if you want to go for a walk afterwards, or maybe you say, once I get this done, I'll go for that coffee. Whatever it is to keep yourself focused for that time period is exactly what you need to do. Now, having a proven system isn't all that it's set out to be either. I know most gurus talk about productivity systems, but they never talk about the compounding things that go towards your productivity, like your health and your environment. Now, your health is super important. Now, one thing that no one talks about is the fact that productivity isn't just about work. It's also about your health and your environment. So when I was going through high school and my early adult life where I was struggling with procrastination, I never realized that it's because my brain had no energy left to focus on it because I was getting terrible sleep and I also was not eating well. It's amazing how much brain fog you get from the specific kinds of food that you eat. So I came into the habit of what worked for me is waking up early and getting work done then. Whereas previously I was too tired at the end of the day to get work done and I didn't realize it. And I also didn't realize that I wasn't getting 8 hours of sleep consistently and I could not use that energy to focus on my tasks. Even if I had gotten 5 hours of sleep and I thought that I was working 8 hours, I was only really getting about 1 or 2 hours of deep focus work. Whereas now I can sleep for 8 hours and I can get 4 hours of deep focus work, and that's all I need. And I'm saving myself 4 extra hours to do other activities that are not necessarily work related. So it's a really healthy cycle that you build for yourself. I also know that I'm specifically sensitive to specific foods where I get brain fog. So I tend not to eat before I work, or what I'll do is I'll find very light meals like avocado on toast or, things that are not too high in carb. And that helps me focus as well. The other thing that I realized is I was just sitting down and trying to work 24/7. I never left my place and I never did anything else. And while, yes, I was sitting down and working, it wasn't productive work. It was just busy work. So I wanted to change that. And the best way that I did that for myself is actually having breaks in the day where I went to go and exercise. Now, there's tons of evidence that you can do your own research on why exercise is so beneficial for your focus and your productivity. But aside from that, it's just also good to get a bit of a change of environment and come back with a bit of a refreshed mind instead of staying in the same space, and you use that focus and you use that intention. And when I would come back from exercising during the day, whether there was a gym or exercising in a different room, when I go back to my workspace, I find that my focus and my ability to get back into the work was way easier done when I had decluttered my environment physically as well. So it's not just about your mental clutter, it's about the environmental clutter around you as well. So if you are surrounded by tons of noise, if you are surrounded by tons of mess, your brain is naturally going to focus on those elements instead of what is in front of you. You always want to make it exciting for your brain and exciting for yourself to sit down at a desk and you prepare it ahead of time. The same way that the best way to get yourself to gym is by setting out your gym clothes first thing in the morning so that if there's less work going into a cupboard, finding everything, you want to remove that friction from your workplace as well. And the best way to do that is remove your physical clutter as well. So what I like to do is I like to set up everything ahead of time. I like to have my laptop ready. Sometimes I'll even put it to sleep and I'll have the apps and everything already open. So when I open my laptop, I can immediately go into everything instead of getting distracted. The same way you want to remove your phone from your environment, you want to clean it up a little bit. You want to make it mentally stimulating for you to sit down and actually get the work done. And that applies to everything. Now, if you don't have access to an environment like that, then sometimes it's just better to go to a fancy restaurant where you might feel a little bit more stimulated, a little bit more encouraged and motivated. And you just sit down, have a coffee and get some work done, or go to a nice cafe in the area. Wherever you find that your environment is going to stimulate how much you work and your focus in that work, and it will encourage you to do a bit more, then I recommend that you go to that place. So look, productivity isn't about those cold plunges and the red light therapy and getting 9 hours of sleep that you track methodically. It's really just about those three core concepts of capturing, organizing, and executing, making sure that you have the tools, the habits, and the routines in between all of that to make sure that it actually works out for you. People love to overcomplicate the conversation and the topic, but it's really just that simple. Now, I can guarantee if you take all of this, you should be able to now go into your daily life and execute on those projects that you've been putting off, get less distracted, and actually do it all without burning out as well. So hopefully that helps, and I'll see you in the next one.